Audit Committee. The only business we have today is a budget amendment. It's a transfer of $4 million from our general fund balance to our capital outlay fund for acquisition of approximately 20.8 acres of land and improvements that's currently known as the Jackson Plaza. Mayor, you want to give some background on this?
Yeah, it's about February. Our codes department and fire marshal we had a conversation. I said, just let's make it uncomfortable for the plaza to exist as vacant as it is. Also, they're in the process of their escalating vacant ordinance, and so they were at, I think, 4,500 this year, going to 4,500, but it's going to escalate next year again. And so we had some conversation with Aronoff, who was had the land lease for the buildings. They didn't go as well as Aronoff had hoped because they wanted to put things there that weren't of the highest and best use of the property. And so I think, maybe October, they sold the parking lot and building for where Popeyes is, and that allowed Aronoff enough capital to buy out their land lease, which put it back in the Rosenblum Trust. And so they were ready to divest that, and so we already started having conversations a month and a half or so ago, and negotiated a price. And so this is the sale price that we agreed upon, and that is for the entire 20.08 acres, all the land associated with the Jackson Plaza and the buildings as well. This doesn't include demolition. We're going to, provided you all approve this and council approves it on first reading, we'll enter into a master site development plan with the firm to go over uses of the plan and all that goes along with it, and then we'll try to look into the cost of the demolition along with the construction of the new buildings. I would say, credit to this budget committee, to our department heads, to our council. 2015 or 16, we purchased the 223 industrial site. That was $2.3 million. The city at that time had to borrow the money to buy that site. And then now we're here asking you all to look at a budget amendment utilizing our fund balance that we worked hard to build up to do that. So we're writing a check for things double what we used to have to borrow money for. That's a testament to the work of this committee and to the council and our department heads.
So, Bobby, we've had some discussion, the mayor and Bobby and I have, about this acquisition and trying to do some preliminary due diligence. Bobby has put together an estimated fund balance spreadsheet there. You can see where we started. This is our unaudited number at the top of the page. Estimating no budget surplus for this fiscal year. And these are the amendments that we've made that have drawn on that fund balance. You see there under FY23 budget amendments. The most notable of those is our street repaving. If you recall, we allocated $3 million and some odd dollars out of our fund balance for that for this year. And then $824,000 that we had when we set the property tax rate to the certified rate. There was some, based off the estimation that we did at the beginning of the fiscal year, the difference there was at $825. All in all, with this budget amendment and another one that is on, that we approved on first reading on Tuesday, our estimated fund balance for this fiscal year would be $29,700,000. Bobby, did I cover that well? Add anything you need to add there?
No, I think you summarized it accurately and fairly, and I do believe that a good starting point in this pro forma would be our FY23 budget. I will say at this point in the year, I'm not aware of any significant or material anticipated unfavorable revenue or expense variance. In recent years, the city has had a history of managing to our expense budget and oftentimes below our budgeted expenses. I guess the only caveat would be we're monitoring property tax collections very closely each day. I think everyone's aware we got off to a delayed property tax season this year, attributable to the reappraisal process. it's picking up each day. I have no reason to believe that we will not collect our property taxes consistent with the collection percentages we've had in the past. It's just at this point, we're trailing that mainly because of the timing issues, and we are monitoring that each day. So we'll continue to monitor that, but we'll work hard to make our stay within our revenue and expense budget this year. And if all of that comes to fruition, I think this is a pretty accurate performance. So.
Okay. I've included our financial health indicators from our last report. I update these at the end of when we get our audited financial statements. So here in another month or so, probably in our January, if we can get our audit in before the end of the year, which we expect. Bobby, do we expect that? Are we on track for that?
From my perspective, I think that we are. I think that we are, for the most part, current with the auditor's request. The only thing that's pending right now is this is the year where we have to implement GASB 87, which has to do with accounting for leases and that type of thing. And that's the last outstanding request from the auditors that I'm aware of today. We've been a little shorthanded in the finance area recently, and we've been engaged with Munis on the technology implementation quite a bit of time. So the auditors have not made me aware of any anticipated delays. I will tell you it's going to be a real push on our part and their part the next 2 or 3 weeks. But as of today, as far as I know, we're on track. So.
Okay. You can see there, if you're looking at our financial health indicator under City of Jackson, the second kind of section down there, number 2 was that audited unassigned fund balance from our general fund at the end of our 2021 fiscal year. That was $28 million, and that represented about 36% of our fund balance to our revenues. That's one of the things we like to monitor to make sure that typically there's a rule of thumb somewhere between 25 to 33%. 33% is a real healthy fund balance that can let us operate for 4 months if we had 0 revenue coming in. And so that's been one of, again, this is an indicator. It's not a hard and fast rule, but these are things that we try to monitor. So with that said, I think we'll be in a good position even using this $4 million that we'll still be able to maintain a reasonable ratio there for us to move forward into the next year.
Yeah, we started out, we ended FY19 with we had coming in at a $16 million fund
Yeah,
balance.
we've 16 to
we started out,
37 now,
yeah.
so we've definitely been responsible on building that fund balance, and now we're able to use that instead of, as you mentioned in the beginning, financing this. The other item I'd like to bring your attention to is the recommendations. The mayor touched on number 1. I think these could come out of the council or out of this committee, a sub-area master plan for that area to look at the needs and associated uses in and around that with those setbacks. And I think an architecture engineering firm could definitely help us with that. Traffic analysis, understanding our stormwater capacity there. We've got some planning efforts from the council that are happening right now, and just bringing all those into alignment for this area of redevelopment. And then number 2 is a feasibility study on this proposed use, looking at what those programmatic uses are, what are the things that this could be, is that sporting events, concerts, conferences, or a variety of those things? What do we have the demographics to support that, and what's the size? That'll get us more, start driving some budget numbers for what the cost of a facility like this would cost us, as not only from an operating standpoint, but from a capital standpoint. So those are some of the things that we'll need to take on here in the coming months. Also looking at where that capital funding and financing would come from. as well as the economic impact of what a facility like that's been proposed would have on the area and the city at large. So those are two recommendations. I think the mayor touched on one, but I wanted to add another one there. As we move forward, I think there's no doubt that it's in the city's best interest to control this property. We all understand, we've seen that area in decline for the better part of 2 decades. And so redevelopment efforts have been in discussion ever since I've been on this council. So it's a good point in time to start moving towards redevelopment in that area. Any discussion that we need to have on the items that we've talked about?
In terms of process, so if it comes out of this committee, then we'd have 2 readings for council, and then so just where we are in the negotiations, or do we have like a verbal agreement, or are we under contract? Or?
No, we can't enter into a contract until you all approve me to enter into a contract. So as far as, so it's a verbal agreement. I've submitted an email to Regions Trust and the site of the Rosenblum Family Trust. They've accepted that, and so Jerry Spoor and their attorney, I can't remember his name now, are working on a purchase sale agreement. So if you all approve this today, then I'll call a special council meeting for next Tuesday, and that'll go before council. If you all approve that on first reading, then we will work to finalize the purchase sale agreement for the property and for the January meeting, yeah. And then also in that same time, working with an AE firm to start with the first recommendation. So the plan is January, purchase sale agreement, second reading of the budget amendment, and working toward a master, sub-area master plan
Okay.
for the January meeting.
But that contract, like to purchase it.
You all have to approve me to purchase it.
Right.
Yeah.
But we, like, assuming all that happens, we're buying it before we know kind of master plan
Yeah.
stuff coming back. And I'm not in disagreement. I think it makes sense for us to control it. But is there room in that contract to put an option on it, or have we thought through that? Is that?
I don't think there is. They're ready to move on. They weren't anticipating getting this 3.5 years early, and so they're ready to move on the property.
Any other discussion?
I think just clarification, Paul, we need a motion to approve the budget amendment as presented. Is that?
That's right, and you could include these 2 recommendations for planning efforts for this, if you wanted to include that.
Okay.
Ross, when you was talking about option, what option are you,
Well, meaning like
if it could be an option, what are you?
yeah, if you put like a timeline on it of like, hey, we're committed to buying this, but the due diligence period, or, you know, at some point if all the study comes back and it is what we're gonna move forward with, then we'll execute the option. As opposed to buying it. Like right now, we'd move forward, buy it, and they would have it. That if for some reason all this came back and it wasn't feasible for us to do it, then we've got the land. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing, I just think you gotta think through all those scenarios.
Yeah, I think regardless of what the feasibility study and the sub-areas plan come back, us not leaving that land up to chance, because the other options of the land are definitely not the highest and best use of what they've been presented with. And climate-controlled indoor storage is not the highest and best use for the center of that city, or center of our city in that area.
I guess another question, man, this mic is hot. Another question I have is, this 4 million is really just for acquisition,
That's it.
correct? And so my next question would be, we have the money in other places within the budget to execute these next items, because that's not included in the budget amendment, correct?
That's correct. And
Okay.
so, the way that we've processed through that previously is, and I'm sure this will be the way that the mayor's office and the purchasing department would handle that. They'll send out an RFP, for a master plan. We'll get that information back on what the scope of that plan and the cost of that plan would be. They would present that to the council, and that would be a subsequent budget amendment that would come after.
Okay.
Yeah.
Or potentially in line.
Yeah, in line, we talked about that, and we
He
didn't
has
want
some
to,
flexibility and
we didn't want to put a not to exceed amount, because you do that, then they get right with the not to exceed amount.
Absolutely.
So we didn't want to put a budget item on it yet until we got a proposal back for it.
And so with both of these items on here, as somebody who doesn't ever do this kind of work, is this something that would be in one RFP?
no, because the master planning efforts are gonna be driven by engineering and a planning and an architecture firm.
Okay.
The feasibility study could be performed by some public policy entity that could help us understand, here's the demographics that support these uses, here's the revenues that those uses would bring in, here's the expenses that are associated with the facility that supports those uses, and here's the costs associated with that, here's how we suggest you fund those expenses, either via the existing budget or other opportunities.
And they also look at too, a management piece of it. Do you contract the management out? Do you operate it yourself? And so it'll give you.
They could make recommendations on, dive deep into the project and make recommendations on what makes most sense for Jackson for that particular piece of property.
Yeah.
Okay. And so would we feel that number 2 cannot start until number 1 is completed?
That's correct, yes. Yeah, so number 2 is kind of a second phase to
Right,
number 1.
okay.
Number 1 is really understanding, and we've had this discussion for 2 years, 3 years now, and we have a sub-area master plan for that was included in our 2017 civic master plan, but it was broad in scope, and we really need to go from 30,000 feet down to 10,000 and start to understand that area and the opportunities that the future may present over there, and what the needs that we have. I think it's, with the addition of Blue Oval and some of the other industry that's gonna follow that, we're gonna be we're already in a housing crunch. We're gonna see that even more in the future. So there's some studies that need to be done on how does this intertwine with the proposed use, residential needs, commercial needs, the support of, if we've got a conference center, where do hotels go that support that, and really starting to plan that area for what that could be. And that can help inform current property owners and the city's efforts to help guide and shepherd that redevelopment process.
Yeah, I think it helps us too. We're looking at revenue options. If we were to say this area can do all whatever, and then a TIF is in one, so that the public project is here and the TIF is out here for future development, and that can aid us in setting that TIF perimeter up.
I would be comfortable going ahead and making the motion that we send the recommendation to council along with the recommendation for the budget amendment, along with the 2 recommendations with it.
Okay.
I second.
We got a motion and a second. Any other discussion on this item?
My only discussion, I seconded, and then I want to discuss it, that's something,
all right.
That's why
but I do know we're not going into this blind. I know we're far wiser than that, and I know there has to be some estimated projections on these next 2 steps in the process, and I'm pretty sure we're fully well prepared for that. I just want to make certain that we've made some efforts in that area.
Yeah.
Yeah, we know a general cost of what these planning documents require, so.
Gotcha.
There's a couple of things that are kind of running in parallel right now. One is an effort by leadership within the city, county, chamber to start to guide planning efforts on a larger scale, that the Madison County, Jackson level master planning. So this kind of dovetails in well with those, at least number 1 does. Number 2, that before we go out and spend money that it costs to build a facility like this, it's in our best interest as fiduciaries to make sure that we understand all of the costs associated with something like that.
Absolutely.
And so
potential
that's really a good check for us to be able to make sure that the council, the community understands what the costs and benefits are.
Yeah, I think for your question, on kind of the planning phases for these documents, I may be wrong. Personally, I don't anticipate recommendation 1 happening before the end of fiscal year 23. And so they'll give us time to plan for the study in fiscal year 24 to do that feasibility study too.
Absolutely.
Just on the immediate documents for that.
And I wouldn't assume that the cost of that would be so substantial
No.
of one, that it would throw anything out of order
Yeah,
for
no,
us.
I don't think so.
And I'm assuming that, I know Bobby's own is, revenue would absorb even some of that as the time continues to move forward in our tax collections, et cetera, in that process. So I'm assuming that's why I asked the question.
Yeah, yeah.
I just don't, I try not to assume, so I ask.
Yeah, as you see the economic impact grow, how that goes, yeah, that all comes with that feasibility piece too.
I think as we move along, we promote the major impact that it's gonna make on that area,
Absolutely.
with it coming there, because, you know, our mall is basically gone. And I think with this coming there and the potential that could bring other businesses and that life back to that area. Because at one time, that was probably one of the best areas to live in at one time, you know, but I think this impact will be, and I think we can sell that all along the way, what we could do, you know,
Okay,
bring
yeah.
life back to that area.
I think you're right, you're looking at coming off the interstate on Highland all the way down there, all the way down to Parkway and a little beyond to the bypass to Linwood, that whole entire large area. I think over the next, I'd say 20 years, will look, if we get this done, we'll look completely different.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Any other discussion? So we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition, say nay. Any abstained? Motion carries unanimously. Any other discussion today? This may, I've got some conversations with Bobby, and the mayor about, any other budget amendments that may come up this month. So we may have a later than usual, or this may stand if there's nothing else that's
As of
added.
right now, we don't have anything.
So we don't have any on the pipeline right now, but if we did, it may be a little later in the month if we were to have another meeting.
Unless something else gets stolen.
December. With that said, we will adjourn. Thank you all for your time today.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bobby.
Thank you, Bobby.
Thank you. You're welcome.